Welcome to this deep dive into the life and ideas of Roger Babson.
Roger Babson.
Yeah. We're going to explore what made him such a unique figure. An economist, an entrepreneur, even a presidential candidate.
Yeah. Not many people know that.
I know, right? We'll be using his Wikipedia article and excerpts from his audiobook, Fundamentals of Prosperity, as our guides.
Excellent.
So think of this deep dive as a chance to really get a sense of who Roger Babson was.
Yeah.
What his core beliefs were.
Yeah.
And what made him so successful.
Yeah. What's immediately striking about Babson is how he combined this sharp financial mind with a deep interest in the human element.
Okay.
The soul of business, as he called it.
Yeah.
He wasn't just about making money, you know?
Right.
He genuinely wanted to understand what drove people and how to create a more prosperous society.
That's a great point. Let's start with his work as an investor, because that's where he first made his name.
Right.
And his approach was anything but ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
He actually used Isaac Newton's law of action and reaction to explain market cycles.
Yeah, it might seem like a stretch.
Totally.
But Babson saw a clear connection between the laws of physics and the behavior of the markets.
Okay.
Just like there's an equal and opposite reaction to every action.
Mm-hmm.
He believed that periods of economic expansion would inevitably be followed by contractions.
So he wasn't just relying on gut feeling or speculation.
No.
He was trying to ground his investment strategies in something more fundamental, something observable and predictable.
Absolutely.
And this leads us to his famous 10 Commandments of investing.
Right.
Now, some of these might sound like common sense,
Yeah.
but Babson was writing back in the early 20th century when investing was still a relatively new concept for most people.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, and even today in our age of information overload and instant trading apps, his advice is surprisingly relevant.
I think so, too.
For instance, his commandment, don't gamble, invest, speaks directly to the dangers of speculation and the importance of making informed decisions based on careful research.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people today could benefit from that reminder.
I think so, too.
But getting back to Babson's action and reaction principle, this is what led to his famous prediction of the 1929 Wall Street crash.
Mm-hmm.
In a 1929 speech, he warned that sooner or later, a crash is coming. And it may be terrific.
Wow.
Can you imagine the audacity to stand up and basically say, the party's over, folks, and it's not going to be pretty?
It was a bold statement, and it earned him a lot of criticism at the time.
I bet.
But it also demonstrates his deep understanding of market cycles and his willingness to go against the grain, even when it was unpopular.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to speak truth to power, especially when he believed it was in the best interests of the public.
That's right. And that brings us to another aspect of his investment philosophy that I find fascinating, the Andrews pitchfork.
Right.
This was a technical analysis tool that he helped develop, and it's still used by traders today.
Yeah.
To identify potential turning points in the market.
Yeah. The Andrews pitchfork is essentially a charting technique that uses trend lines to forecast price movements. What's interesting is how it combines geometry with market psychology.
Right.
It suggests that markets tend to move in predictable patterns, but those patterns are influenced by the collective emotions and decisions of traders.
So it's not just about cold, hard numbers.
No.
It's about understanding how human behavior shapes those numbers.
Absolutely.
And that's a thread that runs throughout Babson's work.
Uh-huh.
He was fascinated by the human element, the soul of business, as he called it.
Absolutely. And this is a great transition to Babson, the entrepreneur and visionary, a side of him that often gets overshadowed by his reputation as an investor.
Right.
He was deeply passionate about education and community development, always looking for ways to use his wealth and influence to make a positive impact.
He was certainly ahead of his time in many ways, especially in his approach to business education.
Right.
He actually lobbied for business courses at MIT.
I did not know that.
I know, which eventually led to the creation of the first MBA program.
Wow.
Talk about a legacy.
He saw the need for a more formalized approach to business education.
Yeah.
One that combined practical skills with a strong ethical foundation.
Right.
He believed that business leaders had a responsibility to use their power for good, to create value, not just for shareholders, but for society as a whole.
And his commitment to education went beyond MIT.
Oh, yeah.
He founded Babson College, of course.
Of course.
Which is still a leading institution for entrepreneurship, as well as Weber College.
Right.
focused on business education for women.
Mm-hmm.
He even founded Utopia College.
Utopia College.
Yeah, which was this experimental community focused on self-sufficiency and sustainable living.
He was always experimenting.
I know, always looking for new ways to apply his principles to real-world challenges. And his entrepreneurial spirit extended beyond education.
Right.
He was involved in various ventures, including developing an early version of the parking meter.
That's right.
That's right. I guess the parking meter isn't exactly what we think of when we think of a visionary entrepreneur.
Right.
But it does show that he was interested in solving practical problems, in making everyday life a little bit better.
Exactly. And it's this blend of pragmatism and idealism that we see in his book, Fundamentals of Prosperity, which really gets to the heart of his worldview.
Yeah.
This book isn't just about making money. It's about creating a life of purpose and meaning, one that's grounded in solid principles and guided by a higher purpose.
So he lays out these fundamentals: integrity, faith, industry, cooperation, and investing in people, almost like a blueprint for a thriving society.
Right.
He believed that these weren't just abstract ideals. They were the essential ingredients for lasting prosperity, both individually and collectively.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's take a closer look at these fundamentals, starting with integrity.
Okay.
Babson uses this fascinating story about a bank vault to illustrate his point.
Okay, I like this one.
Yeah.
He describes this massive vault with all the latest security measures, time locks, steel bars, the works.
The works.
But then he says that the real security of the bank lies not in those physical safeguards, but in the honesty of its employees.
It's a powerful analogy.
Right.
He's saying that true security, true prosperity depends on something more than just material wealth or physical barriers. It depends on the character of the people involved, on a foundation of trust and ethical behavior.
And that trust, that sense of shared responsibility is what allows for cooperation,
Right.
which is another one of his key fundamentals.
Okay.
He uses this great analogy about shoes.
Oh, let's hear it. I'm always a sucker for a good analogy.
Well, he points out how many different people and industries are involved in making a single pair of shoes.
Right.
From the cattle rancher to the leather tanner to the shoemaker to the retailer. He emphasizes that none of them can do it alone.
Right.
They're all dependent on each other.
He's highlighting that interconnectedness, that sense of interdependence that drives a thriving economy, right?
Exactly.
It's not just about individual competition.
No.
It's about working together, recognizing that we all have a role to play.
Exactly. And this brings us to another fundamental that's particularly relevant in today's business world. Investing in people.
Right.
Babson believed that human potential was the greatest asset, often overlooked or underestimated.
Yeah.
He had a knack for identifying talent and nurturing it, even in unexpected places.
He tells this great story about hiring a young man who was delivering trunks
I know this one.
for an express company.
Yeah.
And turning him into his sales manager.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he has another anecdote about a carpenter who became one of his top experts.
Babson saw potential where others saw limitations. He believed in giving people a chance and empowering them to grow and contribute their unique talents.
It's a powerful message, especially in a world that often feels obsessed with credentials and formal qualifications.
Right.
He's reminding us that true talent can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones that we least expect.
And this focus on the human element, on nurturing potential, is something that he also applied to his views on faith and the role of the church in society.
That's a great segue to the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore Babson's more spiritual side.
Okay.
His belief in the power of faith and the importance of religious institutions in fostering those core values that he believed were so essential for a thriving society.
That's right. He wasn't just an investor and entrepreneur. He was a deeply spiritual man.
Yeah, who saw a clear connection between personal faith and societal well-being. Babson's views on faith and the role of the church are really fascinating because they challenge some common assumptions about the relationship between religion and economics. He saw a strong connection between spiritual well-being and economic prosperity, arguing that a society grounded in strong moral principles was more likely to thrive.
Yeah, he didn't shy away from pointing out that the church played a crucial role in instilling those principles.
Right.
Those fundamentals of integrity, cooperation, and service to others that he considered essential for a healthy economy.
Absolutely. He saw the church as a vital institution for shaping character, fostering community, and promoting ethical behavior, all of which he believed were essential ingredients for the thriving society, not just economically, but in every aspect.
Well, what I find really intriguing is that he didn't just praise the church.
Right.
He also offered some pretty sharp critiques of how it was operating.
Yeah.
He even went so far as to call it the most discarded industry of all, which is a pretty bold statement.
Wow.
Right?
He felt that the church was failing to connect with two key groups.
Okay.
Those who saw it as too aligned with the interests of the wealthy, and those who dismissed it as impractical and out of touch with the realities of business.
So he was walking this tightrope, trying to show that spirituality and economic success weren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
That they actually reinforced each other.
Right.
It wasn't about preaching a prosperity gospel in the sense of material wealth being the primary goal.
No.
He was saying that true prosperity stemmed from aligning your actions with a higher purpose, with those core values that we've been talking about.
He believed that if people truly embraced those fundamentals of honesty, hard work, and compassion, they wouldn't have to worry about material wealth. It would naturally follow as a byproduct of living a life aligned with those principles.
But he didn't just stop at critique.
Right.
He actually proposed some pretty radical ideas for how the church could become more effective, more relevant to the modern world. One of his most striking suggestions was that churches should be run more like businesses. He believed that the traditional model of a single pastor trying to do it all was inefficient and unsustainable.
Yeah.
He envisioned churches collaborating, pooling resources, and focusing on their strengths. Imagine a group of churches working together, each with a preacher specializing in a specific aspect of Christian living, faith, integrity, service to others.
It's almost like a business model, right? Specialization, efficiency, maximizing impact. It makes you wonder how many churches today are embracing those kinds of innovative approaches.
That's a great question, and it speaks to Babson's enduring relevance. He was a true visionary, always thinking ahead of his time, challenging conventional wisdom, and proposing bold solutions.
And he wasn't afraid to use data and statistics to support his arguments, even when it came to something as seemingly intangible as spirituality. He actually tracked church membership statistics as a kind of barometer of the nation's well-being.
That's right. He saw a direct correlation between a society's moral and spiritual health and its economic vitality. He believed that neglecting one would inevitably lead to the decline of the other.
So it wasn't just about personal faith, it was about the collective impact of those values on the health and stability of society as a whole. He was a master of connecting the dots, of seeing patterns where others saw only isolated events, and this approach, this blending of data analysis with a deep understanding of human nature, is what made him such a unique and insightful thinker.
So are you ready to explore some of Babson's more unconventional insights?
Absolutely. Let's delve into how Babson, the statistician, saw the church as a barometer of the nation's well-being, a fascinating lens through which to view both economic cycles and the human condition.
It's amazing how Babson connected seemingly disparate things,
Right.
like church membership and economic trends.
Yeah, he was a true pioneer in using data to explore the relationship between spirituality and economics.
So he wasn't just relying on intuition or anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
He was actually crunching the numbers,
Right.
looking for patterns, just like he did with stock price.
Yeah, exactly. He meticulously tracked church membership statistics, levels of religious engagement, and charitable giving, believing these factors provided valuable insights into the overall health of a nation.
And what did he find? Was there a correlation between these spiritual indicators and economic performance?
He observed a fascinating trend, periods of declining religious interest, a waning focus on those core values of integrity, faith, and community, often preceded economic downturns.
It's almost as if a weakening of the moral fabric,
Right.
a shift away from those fundamentals he championed, made a society more vulnerable to those cycles of boom and bust.
Precisely. He saw those spiritual fundamentals as the bedrock of a sustainable economy.
Mm-hmm.
And when those fundamentals eroded, so did the stability of the system as a whole.
But it wasn't all doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
He also found that when people turned back to those core principles,
Right.
when there was a surge in religious interest and a renewed focus on ethical behavior,
Yeah.
the economy tended to rebound.
Absolutely. He saw those periods as times of renewal, a strengthening of the moral fabric that underpin economic growth.
Yeah.
It was as if a society that embraced those values was more resilient, better equipped to weather the inevitable storms.
So it's like he was using these spiritual indicators, these measures of faith and engagement, as a kind of early warning system, way to gauge the underlying strength of the economy.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
He was a master of seeing the big picture, of connecting those seemingly unrelated dots.
Right.
And this approach, this blending of data analysis with a deep understanding of human nature is what made him such a unique and insightful thinker.
So what can we learn from Babson today? His ideas were rooted in a very different era, a time when religion played a much more central role in public life. Are his insights still relevant in our increasingly secular, technology-driven world?
That's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
I think Babson's core message, his emphasis on those timeless principles of integrity, faith, industry, cooperation, and investing in people, transcend any particular era or social context.
He reminds us that true prosperity, lasting and meaningful, requires more than just material wealth or technological advancement.
Right.
It requires a commitment to those fundamental values, a recognition that our well-being is interconnected, that we're all part of something larger than ourselves.
He challenges us to think about what kind of world we're creating, not just in terms of economic indicators, but in terms of those intangible qualities that make for a truly thriving society. Trust, compassion, a sense of shared purpose.
In a world facing unprecedented challenges,
Yeah.
climate change, social divisions, technological disruption, perhaps it's worth revisiting those fundamentals of prosperity, those timeless principles that guided a man who was both a shrewd investor and a deeply spiritual visionary.
He reminds us that true success is not just about what we accumulate, but about how we live, how we treat each other, and what kind of legacy we leave behind.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Roger Babson.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.